Hello, thank you so much for joining me today here at the Moxy Movement. I'm very excited to share with you a tip for a very sassy move. And here at the Moxy Movement, we call this the spider legs. And this is something that might go by different names depending on where you see it or where you learn it. It's ultimately a very popular move that you'll see in a lot of pole dancing videos, a lot of pole dancing routines. It's very sexy, it's very slinky, and it's a little bit of an optical illusion. So when you watch it, it looks like there's a lot going on in the hips and in the legs. It's a lot of this awesome undulation back and forth. But when we're learning this, we want to get some key things down. First of all, it's less in the hips. It's actually not in the hips at all. So the movement is actually going to be from the waist, and the movement is going to be in the knees. Your hips, your hip movement and your hip joint will not move. Even though it looks like it is, it's actually not. So before we get into all of the steps of the spider legs, I'm going to show you something that you can do from a standing position that will really help train your muscles to do this well. And if you've ever done belly dance, you're going to have an easier time with this, but it's going to be an oblique control movement. So these obliques, there are little muscles on the sides of our abs, little muscles here in the waist, and they're going to ultimately pull the ribs and the hip bone together. So as that muscle contracts, you're going to get that hip moving. Now what I recommend to do this from the floor, yes, it's very sexy to do it from a stand, and it's a really sassy move all around. You're gonna have those soft knees, feet are hip width apart. You've got feet forward, so nice alignment in the legs and feet. And if you just soften in your knees, you're gonna get more movement out of your hips. But I want you to think about pulling your hip bone up to your ribs and then relax that. Now, it can happen two ways. I can do that movement by pushing into my foot and putting weight on my foot and letting that hip come up. That's great for belly dance or other types of dance, but for spider legs, we need to figure out how does that feel to use that contraction in the obliques. So from this position, closing the gap from side to side, using those oblique muscles, and sometimes you gotta feel them to find them. You'll feel those working, and those are gonna be your best friends for spider legs. So after you've played with this movement a little bit, and you can go a little bit faster, you can go really slow to feel into it. We're actually gonna take it on the floor now, and that's gonna be where we really discover the spider legs. In my opinion, the easiest way to feel through this and to learn this is from our waterfall. So if you've done that in yoga, we're going to have our feet and our hips overhead. We will be weighted on our shoulders. If you have neck pain as you do this, we can modify that by keeping your hips on the floor, not going up quite as high. Make sure you're very careful and your head is looking more or less towards the ceiling as you're doing this. I'm going to use a pole to help me get up into it. You can use a wall. You can also just roll up into it. But let's go ahead and get into our waterfall. So, if we're using a wall or if we're using a pole, you're going to start with your arms down at your sides. You're going to walk your feet up. When your hip gets overhead, you'll hinge in the elbows and catch your hips. So I'm going to walk those legs and hips up. I get my hips as high as they can. I will hinge and support here. So from here, straddle legs have that straddle leg. We're going to go, spider legs have straddle leg rather. We're going to come to our straddle, and this isn't about flexibility. We can keep it a little more narrow. So wherever that feels comfortable for you, it can be a little more narrow, a little more wide, and notice how your feet can touch the floor here. We want to be in that angle in our hips. We don't want our hips out here. So you're going to close the gap between your knees and your shoulders for that straddle. So once we're in that straddle, we're going to play with those obliques. So what we just did, I'm going to crunch that oblique, crunch that oblique. This is the first step. I encourage you to do a bunch of these on their own. Notice nothing is moving except for my obliques. My hips are not moving. If I'm moving my hips, this is what it would look like. So we find that straddle that feels good, anchor into the straddle, use the obliques. Now the real magic comes in with the next layer into the knees. So as I'm crunching my oblique, I'm going to also bend that knee. Crunch oblique, bend the knee, and then you'll straighten at the end.
Notice I'm closing the gap between my knees and my shoulders, hinging in those knees. So if it gets to be too confusing, go to those layers individually. It's the knees bend back and forth as we toggle in those hips. And as you get more comfortable with this, right, you can make it a little more dramatic and add a little pivot to your hips. So I'm really just doing this a little bit from side to side. Go ahead and come on down, nice and controlled.
That's your spider legs. Honestly, the first time you're doing it, it's gonna feel a little wonky, so just take it step by step. Start with the obliques, do the knee bend side to side. Once you have that down though, you're home free. You're gonna be able to incorporate this into your choppers, into your handsprings, into your aishas. Anything upside down on the pole where your legs are available. And also right side up, it takes more strength to lift those knees against gravity. But we can do this in a lot of different shapes, right side up as well. Good luck with this one. It's so much fun, and I would love to see how you incorporate it into your next routine. All right, darling, thank you for joining me.